Tat Ichunam Mano yatra manasvina mahattvamichchatam tirtam bhavatu shiladhayo gunaha yatra tejasa vichunam mano yatra manasvina mahattvamichchatam tirtam Shotu Shiladayo Gunaha Yatra Tejas Trichunam Mano Yatra Manasvinam Mahatmamichtatam Tirtam Shotu Shiladayo Gunaha Yatra Tejas Trichunam Mano Yatra Manasvinam Mahatmamichtatam Tirtam Roto Shiladayo Gunaha Yatra Tejas Vichunam Mano Yatra Manisvinam Mahatmamichtatam Tirtam Roto Shiladayo Gunaha Yatra Tejas Vichunam Mano Yatra Manasvinam Mahatmamichtatam Tirtam Sroto Shiladayo Gunaha Tejas Trichunam Mano Yatra Manasvinam Mahatvam greatness Ichchatam for those desiring Kirtam the process Shlotahu of the hearer Shila Adayaha high character etc. Gunaha qualities Yatra in which Tejaha prowess Tat that Ichunam for those who desire Manaha adoration Yatra in which Manasvinam for thoughtful men. Translation: anyone who hears this narration of Dhruva Maharaj acquires exalted qualities like him. For anyone who desires greatness, prowess, or influence, here is the process by which to acquire them. And for thoughtful men who want adoration, here is the proper means. In the material world, everyone is after profit, respectability, reputation. Everyone wants the supreme exalted position, and everyone wants to hear about the great qualities of exalted persons. All ambitions which are desirable for great persons can be fulfilled simply by reading and understanding the narration of Dhruva Maharaj's activities. Om Ganatimirandasya Gyananjanaha Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swaparantikam. Namasrishtamanumati Sachiputramatara Surupam Rupam Tasya Gradam Gurupurin Maturin Gohoshtavitin Radha Kundagirivadam Mahodadhikamadavasam Praptoya Sapatita Vipaya Sri Gurum Tam Natoti Mahatvam Mitchutam Tirtam Srotu Shilarayo Gunaha Yatra Teja Sarishtunam Mano Yatra Manasvinam. Anyone who hears this narration of Dhruva Maharaj acquires exalted qualities like him. For anyone who desires greatness, prowess, or influence, here is the process by which to acquire them. And for thoughtful men who want adoration, here is the proper means. Like I said, as a way of introduction, that today we'll be hearing about the benefits of reading and hearing pastimes and activities of Krishna and his devotees. And in many places we hear glorifications of reading a particular section of Bhagavatam or the Chaitanya Charitamrita or the Bhagavad Gita or Vishnu Sahasranam or many Vedic literatures. They have what they call as the Palastuti. And the Palastuti is an enticement to read or to continue to read, and it enables, it works as a sort of a reinforcing of the benefit, to reinforce that which we're aiming to achieve, that goal which we're aiming to achieve. And they're encouraging words to stick to it, to stick to the path. It's a practice, it's an ongoing process. Say Krishna consciousness is not an event for our event managers. Krishna consciousness is the process. It's the thing that it's something that happens as we practice our sadhana bhakti. And bhakti practitioners, as bhakti practitioners, we're all on at different stages, some at the same stage of our process of becoming attached to Krishna, becoming attached to hearing about Krishna, becoming attached to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because Bhagavatam and Krishna are non-different. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a beautiful verse by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, and he says that Krishna Tulya Bhagavata Sama Savashraya, that Srimad Bhagavatam and Krishna, they're the same. Tulya means a scale. If you put them on the scale, they're exactly the same. It'll be balanced. Krishna and Bhagavatam, they're non-different. So we treat Bhagavatam the same way we treat Krishna, the deity of Krishna. And when we come into the presence of the Bhagavatam, we're in the presence of Krishna. And therefore, we want to approach Krishna in a pure consciousness, in a pure state. And we understand that we're becoming purified by the process of Srimad Bhagavatam and purified by the process of being in the presence of Krishna and his devotees. So the benefits are unlimited, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, you can achieve all material and all spiritual benefits. Oftentimes I've wondered how you would achieve material benefits from reading Srimad Bhagavatam. You can understand you can achieve spiritual benefits from the Bhagavatam, become enlivened and to develop knowledge and to understand processes and skills of bhakti, and to imbibe the values of bhakti practitioners. That's understandable. But materially, how do I benefit materially from hearing Srimad Bhagavatam? And one of the ways that we can understand is given to us today. If you want to be great, if you want to have power, prowess, influence in the material world, if you want to want adoration, people to adore you and say that you're really great and fantastic, then Srimad Bhagavatam will also provide that for you. By hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, by hearing the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj specifically, and now we drill into this, what is the palastuti of hearing Dhruva Maharaj? Is general glorification of Bhagavatam, and we'll we'll touch on some of those general glorifications of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And then there are specific ones. And here today is a specific one. We heard in the last few verses. Sometimes it's a string of verses. In the Gajendra Moksha, there was many verses. You remember reading the prayers of Gajendra, and Gajendra goes back to Godhead. Here Dhruva goes back to Godhead, and Gajendra goes back to Godhead. There's a number of verses that glorify the process of hearing about Gajendra going back to Godhead, and when we should hear it, at the morning, in the evening, what mood we should hear it in, and what the benefits are. What is the pal, the fruit, or the benefit of hearing Gajendra Moksha? In fact, the first benefit that's given of hearing about Gajendra comes in the pastime of, in the chapter where at the beginning of the chapter, I think, where Gajendra starts his prayers, or at the end of the prayers, and it says that you can become free from all the dushvatna, all the bad dreams that you have at night. You can become free from them if you recite these prayers of Gajendra. Continually recite the prayers of Gajendra, you'll become free from the effects of bad dreams. But not only that, there's many, many other effects benefits that you can achieve by reciting the prayers of Gajendra, and by hearing how Gajendra goes back to Godhead. How he realigns himself with Krishna. He's reawakening with Krishna. And we'll have a bit of a deeper look into that as we progress this morning in the discussion. But first I wanted to outline or give a framework for discussing the benefits and for discussing the pastimes and personalities of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And we always, a reference point that we have in understanding anything in Krishna consciousness in ISKCON is Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada's vision and mission for Krishna consciousness, which was educational. And in his mission statement, he states that the first purpose of ISKCON, of establishing the Krishna consciousness movement, is to propagate the knowledge of spiritual life, and then to educate all peoples in the technique of spiritual life. So to propagate this knowledge of spirituality throughout the world, and to educate people in a technique on how they can achieve spiritual perfection, and to correct the imbalance of values in human society. That's our first kind of driving mission statement of ISKCON. And that is a framework in which we can understand, and we can analyze, and we can synthesize Prabhupada's teachings in the Srimad Bhagavatam and etc. So it's the knowledge of spiritual life, the technique of spiritual life, and the values of spiritual life. And in different sections of the Bhagavatam, we'll hear benefits, and the Bhagavad Gita, we'll hear benefits for cultivating the knowledge, benefits for practicing the technique of bhakti, and benefits for imbibing the values of bhakti. So the Palastuti will address each of those, the knowledge, the skills, and the values of imbibing Krishna consciousness, or invoking our Krishna consciousness through the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. Right at the beginning, in the Bhagavad Gita, we hear many Krishnas inspiring Arjuna, and through Arjuna inspiring all of us, readers and practitioners of bhakti, that if we even do a little bit of bhakti, we'll be saved. Trayate mahato bhayat. We'll be relieved from the greatest fear. That's a benefit. A benefit of bhakti is you perform a little bit of bhakti, then you'll be relieved from fear. And the greatest fear is to take birth again in the material world, take another body, particularly to take a body that goes downwards. So by doing bhakti, we become free from that. Trayate mahato bhayat. Elsewhere in the Gita, it says if you cultivate the knowledge of bhakti, that was a technique of bhakti. If you cultivate a knowledge of bhakti, vrijinam santarishyasi, then Krishna will carry us over the very difficult ocean of material suffering, of misery, by being firmly fixed on the boat of knowledge. In the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we hear many different references to the benefits of cultivating knowledge in bhakti. The bhakti plavena, bhakti plavena means a boat of knowledge. If you're on the boat of knowledge, then Krishna will take us over this material ocean of miseries, this material world. And right at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, we hear famously that Krishna says, and in the 4th chapter also, Krishna says, even if you're the most sinful of all sinners, Sava papebhyo, in the 4th chapter, by this knowledge, you'll be freed. And in the 18th chapter, of course, Savadamam Parityajam, he says, he will take care of us. Moksha ishyami masuchaha. Krishna is saying he will cause liberation for us. He will give us liberation. If we do this, if we surrender to Krishna, he will give liberation. Savadamam Parityaja. But it should be Mameka Sharanam Vraja. It should be just Krishna. The shelter that we're aiming for, the goal that we're aiming for is purely Krishna consciousness. And in the chapter on Gajendra Moksha, you'll hear that Prabhupada says that the kirtan of Gajendra should be done as anukirtanat. It should be done according to how it's presented, as it is, Prabhupada says. Anu means to follow, right? We follow the kirtan exactly as it is, anukirtanat, of the acharyas. And by following the kirtan of the acharyas, the devotees develop firm knowledge and conviction. And with the knowledge and conviction, we can overcome all sorts of obstacles in our bhakti and remove anarthas. So there's very many beneficial statements starting from the Bhagavad Gita. We have many palastutis in the Bhagavad Gita, you can say, and it's a marketing 101 principle. That nowadays in marketing, you'll give the benefits of a product or the benefits of some service, rather than giving all the features and the specifications and everything. You can download them and you can find them online or anything. But we want to put right up front, what's the benefit of this product? You get this product, this is how it's going to benefit your life. You're going to become more efficient. You're going to become completely satisfied, and all your problems will be solved by purchasing this service or this product. So also that is here in Bhagavatam. The benefit is up front, right up front. And the features and the details and the technique is also there, but you'll hear this in the beginning of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in many chapters, you'll read benefits of this chapter, or a summary of the chapter, and in summarizing the chapter, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami mostly in Sanskrit, or in Sanskrit shlokas, the first verse of the CC. He'll give a summary of the chapter, and oftentimes it's the benefit. It'll give a form of a palastuti. It'll say, by hearing this, you'll get benefit. By hearing this, you'll become free. You'll be able to deal with the apparent contradictions, or you'll be able to deal with the crocodiles of doubts that arise in the mind of the beginning practitioner by taking shelter of the pastimes and activities of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the famous verse in the Apollo Stuti in the beginning of one of the chapters. I was flicking through the CC index this morning to try to find it because my database crashed. I had to prepare a class without database and no internet connection. My God, imagine having to do that. So back to the Stone Ages, and I was going through the index, trying to find in all the different books. And I was staying at a devotee's house that had the old Chaitanya Charitamrita, so there's 17 books, not the new Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's like 10 books, 12 books. but in the old one is 17. And there was one book missing. It must be in that book, because I went through 17 to try to find this verse. But anyway, someone can tell me where it is. Katham chanasmriti yasmin, duskaram sukaram bhavet, vismrite vipuditam shat, Sri Chaitanyam, namamita. The prayer is that if we somehow or other remember Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then very difficult things become easy to achieve. And if we forget Lord Chaitanya, then the most simple thing becomes very complex and very difficult to achieve. So that is a benefit of remembering Lord Chaitanya, a benefit of hearing Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Charitamrita of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Charita of Ramchandra, Lord Ramchandra Charitam, Anvarishyam Purusham Raja, in the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam. It says, when we hear the pastimes and activities of Lord Ramchandra, then we become free from envy. Anvarishyamya Taro Raja. Isn't that a good benefit? To hear the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we become free. The heart becomes free from envy, and that envy is what's keeping us here in the material world. The envy of Krishna is what brought us to the material world, and the envy of Krishna is what's keeping us stuck here in this material world, lifetime after lifetime. The envy of devotees, the envy of the non-devotees, just enviousness in the heart that is very, very deep-rooted and can only be removed by this process, by hearing and chanting of the pastimes and activities of the Lord. This is the ultimate mode of transformational process, Krishna consciousness. Hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, chanting the holy name of the Lord, worshipping the deity with faith, associating with the Vaishnava devotees, and living in the holy place. These 5 potent processes of bhakti will help us to remove all these impurities. Before I speak on the Gajendra Moksha, I wanted to also refer to a few other statements in the Bhagavatam. Some of my favorites and some of my old favorites, and some of a verse that I picked up recently in our study of 3rd canto of Bhagavatam. We're going back through the Bhagavatam at the moment, and we happen to be in the chapter of pure devotional service in the 3rd canto, 25th chapter. Anyway, it's Kapila Dev speaking to Devahuti. And there you find many of Srila Prabhupada's favorite verses, Satam Prasangam, and all those many wonderful verses in this chapter of the Bhagavatam. And one verse that really struck me and it really jumped off the page the other day we were reading was about hearing Krishna Katha. And there he says that for his devotees, Kapila is saying to his mother, for my devotees who relish to hear the Katha, the wonderful activities, Katham Vishta, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for those sadhus, Madhashaya, Katha Mrishta, for those sadhus who do this, Shinvanti Katayanti Cha, who are hearing and discussing my transcendental pastimes, they no longer experience the material miseries of this material world. They know that they don't experience suffering in this material world because they're absorbed in hearing and chanting about the glories of the Lord. And Prabhupada says that at the end of the purport that he says they forget about the material miseries. Not like they don't have material miseries, they forget about the material miseries because that they're absorbed or too much absorbed in hearing about Krishna and hearing about the pastimes and activities of the Lord. So that is a benefit, a big benefit of hearing Krishna Katha, that we become free from the material miseries. And those material miseries are listed in many, many places. The Adhyatmika, Adhibhautika, Devika miseries are a constant reminder to us that this material world is a dukkhalayam. It's a place of suffering, it's a place of misery, and it's a place that we need to get out of. And the process to get out of it is here in devotional service. And then in another famous verse in the second canto, where Parikshit Maharaj is asking many questions. A lot of these Palastutis in Bhagavatam are spoken by Parikshit Maharaj, interestingly enough. Not Sukadeva Goswami or Sukadeva Goswami, but Parikshit Maharaj is speaking these to encourage Sukadeva Goswami to keep reciting the Bhagavatam, to keep it going, to encourage the readers to keep listening, because things are getting better and better, and there's more and more benefits coming. The benefits just keep opening, they just keep coming and coming if you stick to the process. So in that chapter, in the ninth chapter of the second canto, you'll hear Parikshit Maharaj refer to the Bhagavatam on a number of occasions at the beginning, of course, at the beginning of that chapter, and then he asks many pertinent questions. But a very similar one to Srimvatam Svakata Krishna, he says, if you, and Nashtapayashu Bhaddarishu, it's again repeated by Parikshit Maharaj in a slightly different way, that those who hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly with faith, Shradaya, Shrindata Shradaya Nityam, every day, that Nityam means continuously, non-stop process of bhakti. Every day we hear Srimad Bhagavatam, then Vidunoti, like we have Vidunoti Suritsatam, Dunoti Salalam Krishna, then the devotee's heart becomes purified. That's in the next verse, sorry, the next part. Kalenanati Dirgena, in a very short time, he says, very quickly it will happen that Krishna will enter into the heart. It says, Bhagavan Vishate Didhi. Krishna enters into the heart, and Prabhupada mentions in the purport that, all right, Krishna is already in the heart. You know that Super Souls and Krishna is in the heart of all living entities. But Krishna becomes manifest in the heart, fully manifest in the heart, quickly. Kalenanati Dirgena, not in a long time, in a short time, Krishna manifests. There's a poster on the wall in the house where we're staying, and it's a glorification of Bhagavatam. And there's a one-liner underneath a picture of Prabhupada. And it says that one sentence from 112, which I obviously we've read but forgotten. The Prabhupada says that by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, you'll immediately realize God. Immediately realize God by reading Srimad Bhagavatam. So that is in the purport to the second verse, Dhamma Projita Kaitaho, of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's non-stop, it keeps coming and coming to the Bhagavatam to keep us on track, and because we are fruitive, we have, there's always been this tension or debate about in psychology, educational psychology, and motivation, psychology of just sociology and psychology, about behavior psychologists and cognitive psychologists, and what is the most appropriate form of psychoanalysts. And they have all different schools of thought and practices. But at the end of the day, we're a bit of both. We're a bit of everything. We have to take something from behaviorists and something from cognitivists and something from whatever form of psychoanalysis that's available. But the ultimate is in the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. But behavior psychology says that it's our psychology, the likes and the dislikes and what inspires us and what encourages us to perform an action is determined by our environment, association. So it's very much aligned with Srimad Bhagavatam, with the principles of Srimad Bhagavatam, that association is important, environment is important. And that has been tested and proven on through many different experiments, ethical and otherwise, in universities around the world, about the importance of environment, how the environment is such an important, such an important impact on our psyche, on our choices that we make, and on the conditions that we place upon ourselves and upon others, the environment. So therefore, we can understand that the benefits, they're behavioral benefits, right? They're behavioristic in the sense that they seem fruitive, but it's transcendental. So anything in the Bhagavatam that encourages to become attached to Krishna is beneficial. And we might say, well, it doesn't matter. Some people say that the Madhavas don't read the Palastuti of these different verses and stuff. I don't know if that's true or not, but because they say it's fruitive, we should just read without any attachment. But throughout the whole Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita and Chaitanya Charitamrita, we continually hear encouragement to hear and chant. And so we read and we recite and we learn these verses because they're encouraging. We want to be encouraged. There's a philosophy, a school of thought in education that says, punished by rewards. That you shouldn't reward anyone for anything. You shouldn't give anybody any positive praise or recognition or anything like that. Children, you shouldn't give them a stamp or an elephant stamp or a star or something, because that will disempower them. They'll only do something for a benefit, and they'll lose their intrinsic motivation to achieve. But these are written by so many different philosophers and psychologists that have never been in a classroom or never had a child or never worked with anyone in the educational sphere, pretty much. Because we know that we need some form of encouragement. We need some form of recognition. It's like a human need to be recognized. Here, Dhruva Maharaj, it's saying that if you read this pastime and activity, then you can become powerful and you can become recognized in society. It seems to be addressing a basic human need, and that human need can be spiritualized. When we connect it with Krishna, it becomes something that will enhance our bhakti and not detract from our bhakti. And therefore, we encourage to read these stutis. In fact, in the Vishnu Sahasranam, if you read some versions of Vishnu Sahasranam, they all have the same Sahasranam, the same verses of glorification of Lord Vishnu, but they have a Palastuti, sometimes 30 verses of glorifying the whole. If you read this if you chant this Sahasranam every day, day and night, then you'll get all these benefits, material and spiritual benefits. 30 different verses. If you're a Brahmana, you'll get knowledge. If you're a Kshatriya, you'll get power. And if you're a Vaishya, you'll get wealth. And if you're a Shudra, you'll get enjoyment. So it's one of the 30. There's so many of them that say just keep reading and hearing Vishnu Sahasranam. It's very auspicious, of course. And here in the Bhagavatam, no shortage. Pravishta Kanarandarina said in the second chapter, canto of Bhagavatam, that when you hear the Bhagavatam, Kanarandarina means through the ear. The Prabhupada's translation is by hearing by the process of Bhagavatam recitation, it goes into the heart. What goes into the heart? It goes into the heart through the ear. Kanarandarina, Pravishta Kanarandarina, Swanam Bhava Sarohitam. And the instruction sits on the lotus of the heart of the devotee. Sits on the loving relationship of the lotus in the heart of the devotee. Prabhupada translates that. A long translation for one word. Sarohi. Swanam Bhava Saroruham means the lotus sits on the lotus of the loving relationship of the devotee. The instruction of the Bhagavatam sits on the lotus of the loving relationship of the devotee. And what it does there when it sits there, it's not just sitting there, but it's dunoti shamalang Krishna. It's cleansing the heart. It says it's cleanse the hearts of bhava roga, of attachment, of lamentation and hankering, of greed, of madness, of anger, of envy. It cleanses that from the heart. Just like the autumnal rains cleanse the rivers of all the muddy rivers. When the autumn rains come through, in Salilasiyata Sharat, in the autumn season, the rains will cleanse all of the muddy rivers. So there is no shortage of these encouraging words in the Bhagavatam to keep hearing, keep chanting Bhagavatam, because we are in the process, we are in the cleansing process. We're in the fire of Sankirtan, and the fire is cleansing the impure elements. We're under the shower. And in the Gajendra Moksha, we heard Prabhupada. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Gajendra Moksha a bit in more detail, because there we get instruction by Prabhupada to practice hearing mantras, mantra smarana. And that's at the beginning of that chapter of Gajendra's prayers, where Gajendra is reminded of prayers that he learned in his previous, Gajendra is reminded of prayers that he learned in his previous life. And we hear this many times in Bhagavatam, that recollection from a previous life or from a previous existence will be reawakened by connection with or association of a situation or association of a devotee or the presence of some intensity that brings about a recollection. So that recollection is, of course, the prayers, beautiful prayers of Gajendra. And many devotees offer those prayers every day. Many devotees have learnt all those prayers of Gajendra Moksha and recite them regularly because they're so beneficial and they're so purifying. All the prayers of the Bhagavatam are extremely purifying. And Prabhupada says there that we should learn these mantras as Indradumna Maharaj learned these mantras. We should learn to chant. And he said, like the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, number 1. We learn to chant that and remember that always. And never forget to chant the Maha Mantra, because the Maha Mantra is the thing that's going to save us at the end. We might not be able to remember anything, but we can remember Hare Krishna. We can remember it's a simple mantra and it's powerful mantra, Maha Mantra. So he said that one, remember the Maha Mantra and continue to chant the Maha Mantra. Remember, he said, and practice chanting the Nishinga prayers. He mentions 3 prayers in this purport: Maha Mantra, Nishinga, and Brahma Samhita. Or he just says Chintamani Prakarasad Masukapa, which is the prayers that we recite every morning. When we have a darshan of the Lord, what do? We practice reciting the prayers. We offer the prayer to Krishna, and we were reminding ourselves of Krishna's form and Krishna's activities and Krishna's abode and his capacity. Angani yasya shakalendriya vritti manti. Everything that Krishna can do, he does in a very extraordinary way. And we recite those 2 verses. And, you know, I was going to ask Mukunda Maharaj one time why they chose those 2 verses, because sometimes if you try to sing some of the other verses in that exactly the same tune as the Yamuna tune, it doesn't really fit, or it's harder to fit. But it seems like Krishna really just inspired them to pick those two verses, and they've been immortalized in our ISKCON process of greeting the deities. And there was challenge that we don't hear them every day, or particularly in Muna's version. The Prabhupada said, no, you know, this is like, he called it an opera. That Yamuna's singing was like an opera, and it was. Her transcendental voice and the musical accompaniment and the production of it was very genius, and it was produced by. It was actually, the mastermind was Mukunda Maharaj behind it, who wrote the score for it, if you like, and then of course other influences, famous musicians who influenced the recording of these verses. They're very, very important. We were at a program yesterday, not the day before yesterday, and one boy, I was wondering about this boy, right? He's 8 years old and he's like supercharged. And he's like, he asks questions like anything, and he's quite intelligent. And I was on guard, you know. He was there, he's sitting there, and I was like, hey, how's he gonna kind of challenge this presentation? How's he gonna accept it? So he said to me, Prabhuji, not challengingly, humble voice. He said, why do we worship Krishna? He actually had two questions. The first question was about the deity, about Krishna. When Krishna's on the deity form and we offer him bhoga on the plate, and he eats that, and it's still there on the plate. So he's in Gokul, Vrindavan, and he's eating the food, and it's still there. So how do we understand that? And he's trying to get his head around that. What's going on there? If we say Krishna's had his prasad, he's eaten the bhoga, and it's still there. So then we thought of verse Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vritti Manti, that Krishna can eat with any of his eyes, and he doesn't have to digest the food or ingest the food. He can enjoy that in a different way because he's not material, he's spiritual. And then he said, what about this floor, this concrete floor? Why don't we just worship the floor? If Krishna's everything, Krishna's all pervading, he's all around, he's in the trees, he's in the plants, he's everywhere. Why don't we just worship the floor? Why do we worship the deity, or why do we worship Bhagavatam or the devotees? Why don't we just worship the floor? Krishna's everywhere, that's Krishna, I do arti to the floor. What's wrong? What's the problem? So it's a very intelligent 8-year-old boy to ask a question like that. It sounds like Nimai, doesn't it? It sounds like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asking Mother Sachi, why don't I eat dirt? And Mother Sachi's response was, because dirt makes you sick. Not worshipping the concrete won't make you sick, but it won't give you love of Godhead. Because Krishna has a form, there's a functional form that the elements are produced, the elements are transformed. And when we transform elements into different objects, they have a different function and a different purpose. And that was Sachimata's response to Nimai. That earth, when you pour water on earth, it'll just become mud. But when the same earth, the same mud is put on the potter's wheel and it's fired, it can hold, it becomes a vessel and it can hold water, and you can pour water out like that. So it has a different purpose or function when it's transformed. So similarly, when the elements are transformed, any of the elements are transformed into a deity form, then that's a focus for the deity, for the devotees to put their attention on Krishna in a very in a bona fide way, in a very focused way, and in a way where they can reciprocate and relate to Krishna in his Venum Kwanantam Alavinda Dalaya Taksham, in his threefold bending form playing the flute with his eternal consort Srimati Radharani, his consorts in the spiritual world. So that was something about Gajendra Moksha, that we learn these prayers, we learn the Brahma Samhita, we learn the Shinga prayers, and they're already part of our process. It's nothing extra, no add-on. We don't have to do something extra. Extra is the cream on the cake. We've already got enough to get us through, to learn, to remember the Nrsimha prayers, to remember the Brahma Samhita. Prabhupada said one time that we should recite Brahma Samhita every day, the Brahma Samhita. And to remember the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and to relish the Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of the devotees, Satam Prasangamama Vidhi Sampido, in the mood of surrender, in the mood of taking shelter, not in the mood of acquiring, or in the mood of exploiting, or in the mood of becoming more powerful or more knowledgeable or more famous, but in the mood of sadhana, as a sadhaka. As a sadhaka, we read Srimad Bhagavatam the same way we approach chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, the same way we approach the deity, the same way we approach the spiritual master, with humility. And in that mood, we become attracted, and in that mood we become qualified to continue to hear and to continue to recite and to continue to remember the pastimes and activities. So it's a process. We'll finish up here. The process, Krishna consciousness, it's made available for, and it's accessible to those of us who are sincere to sincerely approach the Bhagavatam with a humble, in a humble mood of relishing the Srimad Bhagavatam and not becoming attached to it for different purposes, but rather for a process of purification and a part of our sadhana. And it's a gradual process. Even though it says immediately you realize God, Prabhupada says immediately you realize God. And even though we quoted the verse that by hearing Bhagavatam every day with faith, Shrinvata, Shraddhaya Nitya, that it says immediately you'll become, Krishna will enter into the heart. It is gradual. It's immediate and gradual, both at the same time. So immediately we can get a taste, and to maintain the taste in Krishna consciousness, we have to pray for the mercy. It's not like, it's available for those who have the right attitude and the right mood to stay connected with the flow of mercy. And I'll just finish with one line from a verse purporting Srila Prabhupada in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, which we read the other day. Yesterday we did a Vaishnava etiquette workshop in Hamilton. We participated. We performed. We presented a workshop for the devotees there, and it was very interesting because it wasn't my content. It wasn't I didn't write the course. I was just presenting a course, and on Vaishnava etiquette. And so we were kind of, in one sense, we were just, we workshopped it anyway. It was very interesting, and we sort of took apart this course, this presentation, and I think it came from, it doesn't matter where it came from. It was a good course, and we presented it somehow or other to the best of our ability. And one of the points in there was dealing with seniors. There was all different categories: dealing with guru, dealing with seniors, dealing with god brothers, no dealing with god sisters. It was very brahmachari centric course. So that's for the brahmachari. It wasn't for the Matajis. Mataji's got like 3 lines, and the course was a 90-page course, and it says, oh yeah, Mataji's. You should call women Mataji. That was it. That was it. Etiquette for the women, call them Mataji's and forget about them. The rest of it's about dealing with your god brothers and dealing with group and master. It's quite interesting. But we added, we put in a bit of a position for the Matajis. Don't worry. Try any time Matajis thinking, don't like the sound of that course. But we balanced the equation. Anyway, in that there was a thing there dealing with seniors. And it doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man for this, dealing with seniors, how you deal with seniors. And the first thing is that there was a whole thing about offering obeisances. And I mean, there was the pedantic one about, who got Diksha first and who got sannyas first. And it was all this hierarchical thing, the list. And as if you're going to go around the temple room with the lamp and ask, when did you get initiated? Oh, I got initiated on the 3rd of the 4th, 1985. Okay, I'm going to go to somewhere else. And then like this. It was a bit like that. It was a bit funny. But, you can imagine in a temple with 500 people, you're going to go around trying to find out, get your list of who got sannyas first. Who would know that? If, amongst all the sannyasis, you might know some of the big ones, but for the rest of them, it's like, Maharaj, can you tell me when you got sannyas? I want to make sure I offer this lamp to the right person. Anyway, so we kind of made a little bit of a joke about all that. It's sort of important because we offer the lamp to Prabhupada, and if there's someone important right there, of course we'll offer to them. But if we have to go there and there and there and there, it sort of detracts from the whole thing. And the lamp is going to remain its potency the whole way through. Anyone who gets the lamp is going to get the same potency, and there's no disrespect intended. Anyway, one of the points about surrender, dealing with the seniors, is surrendering, offering obeisances. And it's something that was very important. It is important and was very much stressed and emphasized in the early days of Krishna consciousness. And so we could do a kind of a then and now, or a compare and contrast. Because it was very much part of our culture or etiquette in the 80s was to do dandavats. And it was almost like an exercise. You were getting, really doing a workout. You spend half the day down on the ground, up and down, doing dandavats to the devotees when they came back to the temple, when you saw someone down, bang, 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 bang. And but there's a reason for that, for doing dandavat, but particularly to our elders, to the spiritual master, etc. And that is, Prabhupada says that it's a very what does he say? It's a very useful technique. I think he says that useful technique for attracting the mercy of the seniors, and it obliges them into the heart. So the process is that when we offer the pranipatena, when we do obeisances, when we're surrendering, when we're submissively surrendered to the senior becomes obliged to impart knowledge, to oblige to be compassionate, obliged to nurture those who are taking shelter. It's an obligation because of that surrender that kind of kicks off, or it's a catalyst for the process of guru-disciple relationship, or for senior-junior relationship. And that's the flow of mercy and respect. Mercy and respect, that's how it goes in our devotional life. So that was an important point, and it's a very Prabhupada, it was Parikshit Maharaj, to all of the great sages and sadhus and important people in the universe, Vyasadeva and Narada Muni and rishis and Gandharvas and everybody who had come to the bank of the Ganges to see Parikshit Maharaj in his final 7 days on the planet, and before Shukadeva Goswami appears there on the scene. So all these exalted persons there, and he offered his obeisances to them. He couldn't offer them a seat or something, but he offered his obeisances to them. And there Prabhupada analyzes or explains for us the purpose of offering obeisances. So the benefits of hearing Bhagavatam, the benefits of receiving the full benefit of these palastutis in the Bhagavatam, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Bhagavad Gita, is available for, and it's accessible for, the devotees who are submissive, pranipatena, vashnena, and who inquire submissively, and sevaya, who do service. That's what kind of completes the circle, if you like, of the bhakti program. Are there any reflections or any points that you found of interest in the presentation? That was a what do you call it? A photo finish, and I'll give it to Mataji, closest to the deities. Mataji. Yes.
About glorification, that we need to glorify the name. I have been reflecting for many years in, and then the Montessori philosophy, said, don't praise the kid. We describe what they did, how you really did well, what they were doing, so that they will repeat the same thing. For example, making artwork. Then I was reflecting that for many years, and then just a few years ago, I said, Krishna wants to be glorified. So our need to be glorified actually comes from him. So that's a wrong philosophy not to glorify the child. But even if you just glorify the child like a good boy, it raises kind of I'm good. And what's bad about that? So it's true that we need that. That is not just a human needs, it's spiritual needs. Because it comes from. And then the second reflection is about respecting the elders, that in the daily activities of Krishna himself, as a culture, he demonstrated so Prana, like he worships the sun god to demonstrate that culture, glorifying the worshiping the elders.
Thank you. But now, I'm not sure if our listeners in the cloud heard that. We should have a mic that goes around the room. So, but I'll try and give a brief summary of what you said. The first reflection that Ratnavali Mataji is saying is that from her experience in education, her many years of experience in education, and particularly now recently in Montessori education, they say that you shouldn't praise the child, or you should be specific about the praise of the child. You shouldn't just say you're a good child, but you have to be specific about that. And that is, we take that point. That's a good point, because empty praise can just become a little bit repetitious and not so inspiring. But even so, what you said, good, saying someone that you're a good boy is better than saying that you're a bad boy, because what we say to the children, what we say to adults, becomes their self-talk. What we say to them is what they say to themselves. So if we're telling them that they're good, they're going to start saying that they're good. But better than that, the next level is to say you're good because, you did X, Y, and Z. You put away your toys and you cleaned your bedroom and you got ready for school on time. That's why you're good. So they can put that together. It's not just you're good, you're good, you're good. And sometimes they do something bad and you say, oh, you're so good. And that's false. That doesn't mean anything. And then they think, oh, it's stupid, just getting glorified for doing bad things. I'm good when I do bad and I'm good when I do good. So that's meaningless. That was one thing, and a little bit of an extrapolation, sorry. And the other one was about Krishna himself. He wants to be glorified. It's a very good point. That the human need for glorification comes from Krishna. He likes to be glorified. And that glorification, he likes it not because he's some kind of narcissistic, egotistical personality that's completely, up in the clouds. He likes it because then he understands that the devotees are rectifying their errant consciousness, their errant mentality, that they're the supreme, and they're recognizing Krishna's supreme position, and that Krishna himself formed the glorification when he was here in the material world as an arpana, as an offering to seniors. Thank you. I thought it was Adi Lila chapter 14, text 1. And that was the book that wasn't there. Amazing. Well, I got purification by opening the book, checking the paragraph. Adi Lila chapter 14, text 1. It's a very beautiful verse and an easy verse for us to learn. If you remember Lord Chaitanya. Hard if you don't remember Lord Chaitanya. Any other points? Cool. Yeah, good question. It's something that's coming up a lot lately in our discussions with devotees. Question is that there's a tension between name, fame, glory, and distinction, adoration, that we should avoid that. Vaishnava K, what sort of devotee are you? Not that we should be seeking that, that we shouldn't be seeking like that. And that there's a human at the other end of the continuum, that there's seems to be a human need for recognition. There is a human need for recognition, an acknowledgement, and we're just saying that this is Krishna wants that. Krishna wants his devotee to be glorified and become more famous than himself. Patija, in the verse Yogakshemam Vahamyam, that Krishna places the duty on Arjuna to declare that his devotee will never perish because his devotees, people will listen to his devotees more than Krishna. So one thing that we've been discussing a lot lately is pride. The theme of pride has come up, and we discussed this with one of the devotees here in Auckland just before we went away. She's a student doing, in a lady in high school, and she's writing an essay on pride. She identified this theme of pride in a film that they had to watch at school, and they're doing a film essay. And this character has displays pride in his ethnicity and pride in his occupation and pride in different parts of him. So she identified that, and she wants to write about that. And then I was reading Bhagavatam. I was looking for this reference in Bhagavatam, and Prabhupada talked about pride. As she was telling me about this essay, Prabhupada talked about pride in terms of that the devotees, what is it? Pride is the pride of a devotee is not necessarily considered to be a bad thing, because devotees, Parikshit Maharaj was proud of his lineage. He was proud of his forefathers, how they were connected with Krishna, and how they had the direct association with Krishna, and how they got the blessings of Krishna. And so he was proud of his uncles and his grandfathers and his father. Like, he was proud of his grandparents and his uncles, etc., and grandmother, etc. And Prabhupada explained that pride that's connected with devotion, with bhakti, with Krishna, is not false pride. Oftentimes you hear Prabhupada say false pride or false prestige. We have to be free from false prestige. Nimana moha jita sangha dosha, in that verse, in the 15th chapter. We become free from false prestige and false association or false proprietorship. So there's real proprietorship and false proprietorship. There's false prestige and real prestige. And that's one thing that we can see, that we shouldn't be that we're not proud of like our spiritual lineage or our connection with Srila Prabhupada or our guru. Not like a spiritual master does something like yesterday. We would have heard so much glorification of His Holiness David Media Maharaj because of the achievements that he made, or last week in Melbourne, because of the achievements that he's accomplished in bhakti, in service to Srila Prabhupada, and that the acharya, the previous acharyas, some the parampara. And so we become proud of that, that we're connected with that, and not false pride, but that's, we're really, we think that we're kind of on a good thing here with Krishna consciousness. Nothing to do, like we don't artificially say, well, that's nothing, we just don't ignore that. But, so what? Somebody did a great performance, and you say, well, we don't want to say anything because we don't want to make them puffed up. So they just did a great performance. So whatever becomes impersonal. So we have consideration. We have a consideration of expertise, and a consideration of influence, and a consideration of time, place, circumstance, etc. And we're personalists. So as personalists, we have all these emotions, and one of them is pride, and humility is another. I mean, that's a very much connected concept or value. And that is, humility doesn't mean that we just become a doormat for the devotees to walk all over us, or for anyone to walk all over us, because we, so for Guruji, I can't do it, I'm useless, I don't know anything, and, I need your mercy like this. That's one level, of very high level, you can say. We hear Bhaktivinoda Thakur, we hear Narottam Das Thakur occasionally presenting themselves like that, but they're completely, all gone, they're all gone and they're useless. But it's a very high level, but for a functional level of our bhakti, Sanatana Goswami gave a definition of humility means that we understand that our knowledge, our skills, and our values, if you like, come from Krishna or from the devotees, and therefore we utilize them in the service of Krishna, and that's our humility. Our humility is not that we're useless and we don't know anything. Our humility is that we have talents, we have skills, we have individual capacity to connect with Krishna, and we do that in the best way we can, and that's bhakti. The definition of bhakti is attention to detail. We do things the best possible way we can do that, and that will make the spiritual master satisfied. That will make the devotees happy. That will make that will create a good environment, an environment where we see growth, an environment where we see transformation, an environment where we see positive, you can say, determination or intentional activities. When we understand the real definition of humility and pride, and we're proud of our work. Like a craftsman's proud of his work, and he'll go the extra mile to make sure that all the corners are rounded and everything's perfectly situated and it fits properly and to the very last joint and to the very last polish. It's perfect, because that's the offering. Our offering is, we want our offering to be as high a standard as possible to Krishna, and Krishna will accept that. Krishna doesn't need the high level, but the high level, that the more endeavor we put into our offering to Krishna, the more the purification and the more understanding that our pride becomes not false prestige, it becomes prestige, it becomes pride for Krishna, humility, not false humility that I don't know anything, but we're humble, we know stuff, we know how to do a kirtan, we know the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, we know how to paint, we know how to drive a car, whatever. We do it for Krishna, and we do it as the best of our ability. I think that's one way to reconcile the tension between, not aspiring for or seeking fame, distinction, and adoration, and being proud of what we're doing in Krishna consciousness, what we're doing with our lives, being intentional about our offering to Krishna. Anything else? Did you have any other thoughts on that thought? Yes, yeah, that's another good point. Thanks. We also came up with that point too, that how did Prabhupada receive glorification, and how did the spiritual leaders of our society receive glorification? Pass it on. Pass it on to the Parampara, pass it on to Srila Prabhupada. That we're receiving this capacity to engage in bhakti by Prabhupada's mercy, the Prabhupada's mercy, and so we put it back there, and that keeps us in the right consciousness, that not in that consciousness that, I have this sense of entitlement that I walk around and everybody should bow down to me, and I can do whatever I like, I can go wherever I like, I can say whatever I like, I can wear whatever I like. Not like that. that we remain respectful and conscious of who we are, where we are, where we're from, and where we've got it, our inspiration from, where we get our inspiration from, the source of our bhakti. Okay, yes, Bill. Yeah. Thank you for that also. We discussed this yesterday in our workshop. It was one of the points. 6 loving exchanges between the devotees. So the question is, what's your name called? Vegavan. Vegavan. Vegavan will open up for the Vegavan Prabhu. Start here. So Vegavan was asking about the 6 loving exchanges from the devotees, and just briefly, if we're getting on, is that how that might relate to glorification of devotees. You know, giving and receiving glorification, giving and receiving gives revealing the mind, and hearing the mind being revealed by other devotees. And it's a really important part of our of the culture of Krishna consciousness and the etiquette of Krishna consciousness. And so one of the things that is important is to be able to receive gifts. Some people can't receive a gift, or to receive graciously, and to receive it with you know, to be present when you receive that present, to receive that gift, and to receive recognition or glorification. That when it's something that needs to be practiced. You know, we practice everything in devotional service. So there are 6 loving exchanges where they do enhance our bhakti. When we engage in them, we need to practice, and practice makes perfect. The things we do daily. So somebody might say, you cooked a really great offering, and then we practice saying, well, that's thanks to Koma Prabhu because of his cookbook, or he gave me all this inspiration, or such and such a devotee. I wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for such and such, without putting ourselves down. But this is, you know, where I got it from, and understanding, well, that was a really great kirtan. Well, I'm really, you know, I'm trying to follow in the footsteps of Ayendra Prabhu, something like that. So we learn to shift it, and to thank the devotees for their recognition, and to put across and to acknowledge where we receive our direction and our inspiration from. But 6 loving exchanges is definitely very much related to and connected with the idea of receiving and giving recognition to other devotees. And we feel good when we recognize other devotees. It makes us feel good. We feel good in the assembly when the devotees are being glorified. We feel happy, and we feel light, and we feel enthusiastic to do our bhakti. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gopananandi.